demonstration as to the brazing techniques that I teach over at the Brookline Art Center. We have a wonderful class there, 2 semesters every year. A lot of other classes like pottery, drawing, and sculpture are taught at the Brookline Art Center. This is a sculpture, 3-dimensional design. We try to use a lot of different metals, different materials that we incorporate over the metal later on, over frameworks that we create. This is a great technique in terms of building models. For example, this is a model that I built rather quickly to see how I felt about a large 10-foot by 10-foot sculpture that I created, a large work that was inspired by the author Jorge Luis Borges' Circular Ruins. And so I created this model, and then from this I was able to create a large 10-foot by 10-foot sculpture that I also incorporated and covered with text. So the materials that you want to have to do this brazing project, we start with basic welding rods, different thicknesses. You can work either with a thin material or a thicker gauge material as well. These are referred to as steel welding rods. And these over here are brass or bronze brazing rods. We also use a flux, and it's also very important to have a piece of sandpaper around so that you can clean your metal before you go to braze it. You want to make sure your metal is clean. You want to make sure that it's surfaced with some flux, which helps the brass flow once it's melted. And you also want to have your torch. So regular household propane torch is great. You can use different tips if you want to work with thicker materials. Basically, you take your torch, you light it, adjust it nicely. The hottest point on a torch is actually right past the tip. There's a blue flame, and actually if you're within the flame you have a problem. It's not going to function well. You want to be right in front of the flame, and the metal will heat up very quickly that way. So I'm going to do a very basic braze over here without burning myself. I've sanded both ends of the metal that I want to connect, and I put flux on both ends. I now take my brass brazing rod, dip it into a little bit of flux, and then there are a few things that you want to think about as you're doing a braze. You want to focus on the direction of the flame, you want to think about gravity, and you want to think about capillary action. Capillary action is what happens with a sponge. So if there's a small tight area between 2 pieces of metal, the molten brass is going to slip right into that area. So I'm going to point it right at the point where I want to go. Focus here. You're going to heat this up till it's very red, and the moment it's red, it's ready to go. The brass heats up much more quickly, so I'm going to point it at that as well. You don't let them touch till it's ready to go. And then we're going to see a little brass ball happen at the tip, and you're just going to touch it down. So you have one section created. So I'm creating a simple triangle over here. Again, I added some flux to the edges. The brass is only going to flow to the areas where there is flux, and I also sanded everything down, and I have it held down by just a simple metal ruler. So again, I'm just going to point at this piece of metal. I'm just pointing right at the corner, which is the only place where I want the brass to flow. I'm going to wait for this to get red hot. It's happening fairly quickly here. And then I see that it's hot. I bring in the brass, but I'm not touching it yet. Holding it right above so I keep both the brass and the metal red hot. And then I'm seeing a little ball happen, and I'm just going to touch it down. Keep this up a little bit more. And there it is. So I'm going to do that for the next corner. You'll find that in terms of doing any kind of sculptural work, or even here with the brazing, what takes the longest amount of time is actually just preparing yourself, being properly set up, and then the actual welds happen fairly quickly. So, in a few moments here, you create a nice simple triangle that can be used to do many different sculptural forms if you want to. Also, by means of bending this metal around different forms, you can get some beautiful curves to happen. So some really interesting shapes can be created. An interesting sculpture can arise from that. Sometimes you'll find that you want to braze something to an area that's kind of complicated to do and you're only one person and you don't have 7 hands. So what you'll want to do is actually set it up so that you already have the brass on one element, and that way you won't have to use this piece again. You'll just prepare brass onto the end of one piece of metal that you're going to attach to another, and that way you won't need to use all your hands. So for example, over here, I want to attach this piece of metal to this location, and so normally I would clean it, but I'm cheating and I'm not going to. And I am going to put some flux, however, which is going to help the metal flow. Now again, in a situation like this, it's very important that you point your flame in the proper direction so you can guide the brass to where you want it to go. So now I don't have to use the brass rod. I put the brass rod down because I've already put a nice ball of brass over here, and I just want to attach it to this piece over here. So I'm just going to heat the metal that I'm going to attach to first. It's turning red. This one's going to turn red as well. And I'm going to point the flame towards the one that I want it to flow to. And once I see it flow, which is like a liquid flow, it's ready. And as you can see, that's attached. So we can now continue in another direction. So now I'm preparing another one, same method. Again, making sure that I'm pointing only towards the tip of the metal so that the brass ball stays at the tip of this piece. I keep a lot of different clips and pliers and different little tools to help me hold things in place. They usually don't last very long because they melt. So now I've installed these pieces over here. Let's see what we do. I'm using some small clips that I keep around the studio to hold things in place. I've added the flux. I'm once again going to just point in the proper direction towards the piece of metal that I'm trying to attach to the other. I have the flux there, I have the flux on my brass, waiting for it to get red hot, and now I'm going to hold the brass right in front of it, and wait for a little brass ball to happen. Make sure that both pieces of metal underneath are red hot, and ready to attach to the brass it's going to connect it to. There we go, we have one. Now over here, we're going to hit the other one. Just as quickly. I have a nice composition here, but I've decided that I would like to see some more shapes coming forward from this triangle, and I think some circles would be nice. A method that I use to create circles is I use different shaped pipes to create different size rings. I basically start by taking a piece of metal. I attach a piece of metal with pliers. The pliers attached to a nice tube over here to a certain size. I'm able to take a piece of metal and very tightly bring it around. release the metal off the piece here. We now have a type of spring, it seems. But when you cut your spring apart, the rings can be very quickly attached together using the same techniques. I put a little piece of brass between the two elements. They're going to be connected. And slide it up between two bricks. So here we go. We've decided to use two large circles with a small circle in the center. We're going to count to 3, and we're going to add it to our composition over here. Now I decided that I need to connect this piece to the larger piece, and that again, since I don't have 7 hands, I'm going to try to get as much of the brazing part done ahead of time before I actually make the final connections. So I'm going to attach brass to both ends of this, and that way I can connect to this piece and to that piece more easily. I'm actually going to attach a piece of brass to this as well. So that it flows quickly, because it's kind of a precarious situation we're trying to attach very quickly. So we're going to do it right. We have it clean. We're going to add flux to the areas where we want the braze to attach. There's already the brass and bronze braze on here. It's also on here. I've cleaned both pieces. And now I'm going to attach the two, and all I have to do is actually hold the torch and this into place without burning myself. So for anybody who's interested in trying out some of these techniques, please contact the Brookline Art Center. Also, if you want to see any more of my work, I do have an exhibition over at the Judy Rottenberg Gallery on Newbury Street, starting January 9th, and also an outdoor sculpture exhibition at the Cairncroft Sculpture Garden in early May. Thank you.